Well, let's make a start. So, Vanakkam, Vandanam, Namaskara and Namaste to our Indian colleagues, and a very good afternoon to our Australian colleagues joining the line. My name is Michael Costa and I'm the Australian Deputy Consul General based in Chennai, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. It's an honour to welcome you to this exclusive country session as we explore commercial opportunities across the Australia-India space ecosystem. We have a great mix of government officials, space industry leaders, entrepreneurs, startups and academics from both countries on the line to discuss how we can build on our strong government-to-government collaboration to do more together. Before we start, just to note that we've received a large number of questions from our audience members who have registered, and we'll use them to shape this session and also to draw on them during the panel discussion. And to note that the chat function is live, and if you do have any further questions, please feel free to add them as well. And if time permits, we'll get to them. We've started slightly late, so the maximum time we'll reach is an hour and 15 minutes. So 12:30, this will be over. I'd like to welcome Australia's High Commissioner to India, the Honourable Barry O'Farrell AO, to formally open the session. Over to you, High Commissioner.
Thank you, Michael, and namaskar from the Australian High Commission here in New Delhi. A warm welcome to all panellists and participants in today's session, especially CEOs from Australia and India's leading space firms, experts from our world-class academic institutions, and officials from the Indian Space Research Organisation and Australian Space Agency. I'm pleased we're joined by ISRO's Assistant Scientific Secretary, Madam Srirekha, and would like to thank the Confederation of Indian Industry for supporting this country session, which is part of the 20-day International Space Conference and Exhibition. I know Anthony Murphy, Deputy Head of the Australian Space Agency, was pleased to address the opening session last week, and Australia is honoured to be this year's country partner. Australia has a long and proud history with space. For 50 years, Australia has been the eyes and ears of space as part of NASA's global space infrastructure, where we received the first pictures of Armstrong's first steps on the moon, facilitated communication with deep space probes and the rovers on Mars. Now, with the support of our own space agency, we're seeking to embed Australian industry and institutions into global supply chains and facilitate connections across the global space ecosystem. We've been partnering with India in space since 1987, supporting data collaboration and laser ranging for Indian satellite systems, conducting joint research, and we've even launched an Australian satellite from ISRO facilities. And we're keen to do even more together. In February this year, we refreshed the Australia-India Space MOU to enhance space science, technology and research collaboration, and to boost our respective economic recoveries and to create jobs. As the Australia Space Agency works with ISRO to support India's inspirational Gaganyaan human space flight mission, both countries are opening up their sectors to the private sector of the world. COVID-19 and lockdown may have delayed launches, disrupted supply chains and limited access to finance globally, but it's also accelerated convergence in our strategic, economic and commercial interests, as evidenced by the elevation of the Australia-India relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership last year, our first ever 2+2 dialogue between foreign and defence ministers 2 weeks ago. We're especially excited about India's planned revisions to Fdi norms in the space sector, which are currently under review by the Government of India. Today, building on the insights from the conference last year, you'll hear from our respective space agencies, industry experts and incubators to understand the Australia-India space ecosystem, our respective international engagement priorities, and importantly, about two-way commercial opportunities. Panellists will highlight how Australia's technology and services in Earth observation, leapfrog R&D, communications, robotics and more can augment Indian capability to make Indian startups more globally competitive and to support India's national space program. We'll also hear from Indian space firms and startups already exploring partnerships with Australia. This session is one of a number of high-level dialogues we'll host, exploring how Australia and India can collaborate bilaterally and with Quad countries in the new golden age of space. including at the Sydney Dialogue and the Bengaluru Tech Summit, both in November. By identifying pathways to access national space facilities, contracts and activities in both our countries, we aim to assist Australian and Indian firms to partner and grow, to promote the useful piece of outer space, and to achieve a safe, prosperous and secure future for both nations, the region and beyond. Dhanyavad.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for that overview and scene setter. So before we can explore commercial opportunities, it's important that we all understand the conditions in which our space industries operate. As this is constantly evolving, it's important to hear from the policy and regulatory leads from both countries, and that is our respective space agencies. So we'll start with India. ISRO's Assistant Scientific Secretary, Ms. Sri Rekha, who has been instrumental in managing the interim Indian National Space Promotion and Authorisation Centre, or InSpace, including the application process for use of ISRO facilities and involvement in national space missions, which we know is of particular interest of attendees today. So, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasure to turn to Ms. Sri Rekha to share an overview of ISRO priorities, the interim application process, and key areas of interest for collaboration.
Namaste, Mr. High Commissioner. Good morning and good afternoon, dear participants. Thank you, Michael, for the good words. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk in this important session of commercial opportunities across Australia, India's space ecosystem. Before going to the space reforms in India and in space, let me give a brief introduction about the overview of Indian space program and what India is in terms of space capabilities. Indian space program was initiated in the 1960s, and India has a long and distinguished record of space activities today. Over the last 6 decades, India has developed end-to-end capabilities in building, launching and operating launch vehicles and satellites and deriving applications for the benefit of the society. Now, the space activity landscape has changed, and over the past few years, space industry is emerging as one of the most lucrative industries globally. In line with this, several Indian private industries have ventured into space to meet the ever-growing demand in space. ISRO has already set the background for Indian space industry to grow, and this is done through forging a strong relationship with many Indian industrial enterprises, both in the public and private sector, to implement its space projects. So there is a tremendous scope for space industries in India. And to enable them, Government of India has announced space reforms for unlocking the space potential of India. So through space sector reforms, the business domain in space is open to private industries, and it includes building and launching launch vehicles, building, owning and operating satellites, providing satellite-based services, establishing ground segments, research partnerships, and providing mission services. And Department of Space will enable private players to carry out end-to-end space activities. And you know, a national level autonomous nodal agency, namely the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, acronymed as InSpace, was created under the Department of Space as an enabling mechanism for private players to carry out space activities in India. And this agency permit and monitor private sector's space activities as per the regulatory provisions. The InSpace mechanism also enables the sharing of capital-intensive Department of Space-owned facilities and premises to private entities. And the technology, expertise, and facilities of the department will be offered at a reasonable cost through a suitable mechanism. And a national legislation for space activities will be enacted to address the necessary legal framework. To facilitate these reforms, the existing policies in space domain will be revised, and we are bringing new policies for enabling the private industries. And opportunities will be created for private players to participate in planetary exploration and space travel projects. ISRO will continue and enhance the focus on the development of innovative space applications and space technologies towards capacity building in space. Research and development activities and programs are being pursued across ISRO's 5 verticals. So we have 5 verticals called space applications, space infrastructure, human spaceflight, space transportation system and capacity building. And as you are aware, the major one will be the Gaganyaan program, which shall mark India's entry into the club of nations with human spaceflight capability. So I'm not going into the future R&D programs. You are already aware, so I'll come back to InSpace. So as you already know, InSpace board has already been constituted. Soon it will get established in a full-fledged manner. So till recently, there was an interim InSpace functioning in Department of Space, and we were receiving proposals and requests from private industries through this mechanism. And in view of this InSpace formation, the interim InSpace mechanism will be referring all the proposals which we have received so far to InSpace for its consideration. Now, coming to InSpace structure, InSpace will have a chairman, technical experts for space activities, safety experts, experts from academia and industries, legal and strategic experts from other departments, and members from Government of India. And coming to the process of applying to InSpace, the applicants need to give their their applications through an online portal of InSpace. And there will be 3 directorates inside InSpace, that is the technical directorate, a legal directorate, and security and safety directorate. And these directorates will review the application and give the necessary recommendations to the InSpace board, subject to which the InSpace board may or may not grant permission. And once the authorization or the license is granted, the activity will be continuously monitored by the InSpace monitoring directorate. So this is the whole process which is going to happen in InSpace through as the regulatory framework. Now, coming to the opportunities for foreign companies, I think Dr. Shivan, Chairman ISRO, has already spelled out in the inaugural session that there is ample scope for foreign companies to tie up with Indian companies in the space sector. We have the space FDI policy, which is getting revised, and the revised policy will expand the avenues of opportunities for foreign space companies to invest in India. And on this occasion, I would like to reiterate that Australia and India have been partnering, as already highlighted by High Commissioner, since 1987 to support data calibration and laser ranging for Indian satellites, launching Australian satellites, and conducting joint research. And India's partnership with Australia on the subject of space, I think, is underpinned by a country-level agreement since 2012, and the Australian Space Agency and ISRO have already enhanced the cooperation across the civil space activities. And the space reforms and the predictable space sector policies which are coming up will create more opportunities for both the nation's government and companies to collaborate together for space-related activities in almost all domains of space. And I wanted to inform that for commercial queries for Australian industries, you may contact the New Space India Limited, the commercial arm of Department of Space, at contact-nsil@isro.gov.in. And for regulatory matters, you may please write to in-space@isro.gov.in. So in a nutshell, India is a vibrant economy with excellent prospects for further growth, and there are a lot of opportunities for investing in space technology for sustained benefits, especially in the changed space industry ecosystem. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for that overview, Sharika. It's great to see these reforms coming into play. It's great also that there's opportunities for partnership, so either joint ventures or if Australian companies have Indian subsidiaries, and it's great that it's finally been formalised as a process. So we can share those details after this session for all the participants and to assist Australian and Indian business to work together. We'll now turn to the Australian Space Agency, which is the front door for Australia's international engagement on space. Mr. Carl Rodriguez is the Executive Director, Engagement and Industry Growth at the agency, and he'll provide an overview of Australia's space sector, priority areas for collaboration under our civil space strategy, and where we see opportunities for engagement internationally, including with India. So over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Michael, and it's an honour to be here. High Commissioner, Ms. Sharika, and panellists, it's been a fantastic opening from the High Commissioner, and also to understand the reforms as so articulated by Ms. Sharika. The overview of the space sector, I think everybody has a good understanding that Australia has had a very long history in space, and as the High Commissioner mentioned, supporting of the moon landings, but also continuing to support the current lunar activities and now also supporting many, many deep space missions, including ISRO's Chandrayaan missions and continuing on for their Gaganyaan mission as well too. The Australian Space Agency is only 3 years old. We were created to support the growing commercialisation and entrepreneurialism in space. There's been significant support from the Australian government and the Australian people for the space sector generally, and for the Australian Space Agency more specifically. Since the creation of the agency, the Australian government has invested more than $700 million into civil space programs directly, and has identified space as part of the $1.5 billion modern manufacturing initiative to help bring our country out of COVID and to grow our manufacturing industry. Our space sector is currently estimated roughly around about $4.6 billion in size, of about 11,500 jobs. The agency, however, was created to grow this sector by 2030 to approximately 12 billion and to add 20,000 new jobs into the sector. And we're doing this through international partnerships, growing our own capability, being a responsible global citizen, and inspiring all Australians. There are many benefits to working in and with Australia. Of course, across the board in general with India and Australia's long history in other sectors, but particularly because we have a young and entrepreneurial space sector. Of course, the governance and law and legal systems are very familiar between our two nations. Internationally responsible, we have great technology and research in ecosystems, and of course, everyone's very familiar with our open and welcoming culture. The skills and capabilities of our sector are something of value that we believe we can bring to the international community. And of course, our geographic advantages of a large land mass in the Southern Hemisphere will not go unnoticed for a number of folk. But the biggest reason is the great opportunity to partner, as our leaders have stated several times, from prime ministers down to even these forums. To grow both our space sectors and to engage in this commercial bounty that lies ahead. There are significant opportunities for our space sectors to share knowledge, to leverage expertise, and to grow our commercial industries together. Both governments are seeking new ways to support this initiative in 7 priority areas, ranging from precision navigation and timing, Earth observation, space domain awareness, communications, robotics, leapfrog R&D, which includes space life sciences, quantum, and more, and access to space, noting both our nation's ambitions and capabilities to see international commercial law. These areas. In robotics, Australia is working to leverage our expertise in sectors such as our resources sector, some of the world's harshest conditions. We'd like to bring off Earth. In Earth observation, the Australian government committed significant resources to Digital Earth Australia to help local businesses harness Earth observation data, and we have a growing list of companies that are applying EO data to predict disasters, help with resource management, plan developments, agri-tech, maritime. Other sectors are benefiting enormously from this focus. We are complementing this with the world's first space data analytics centre built right next to one of Australia's largest supercomputers to harness significant data sets and allow for the integration of more. Communications projects are already complementing our ground station coverage and looking forward towards advanced optical communications and quantum communication support. Additionally, we're looking to collaborate on space life sciences of particular interest as India and other nations commence their human spaceflight programs. And the complementarity in our geographic locations can add significant value to global activities and initiatives across SSA, mission control, communications, access to space, and more. In Australia, it's a very exciting time for the space sector, with momentum building across the country. In 2021 alone, the industry has reached many important milestones alongside the Australian Space Agency, and investment from the space sector in Australia is growing and going from strength to strength. Queensland's rocket company Gilmore has recently secured the largest private equity investment raised by a space company in Australia. In the not too distant future, we should see the first commercial rocket launches from Southern Launches Complex in Whalers Way. And while this is a return to space launch for Australia, this again truly signifies the open collaboration we seek to share with other nations. And beyond this, from next year, NASA itself will use the Northern Territory as its first commercial sounding rocket launch outside of the US for scientific research, viewing parts of the sky that can't be observed from the Northern Hemisphere. More specifically and more recently, our Moon to Mars initiative. We have an active Moon to Mars program, which was announced by our Prime Minister in 2019, which seeks to engage and build our capability in space exploration by supporting opportunities for Australian companies to enter into international supply chains to collaborate on demonstrator missions and to pursue an ambitious lunar mission, Australia's first. Organisations across the country have received support through grants under our Moon to Mars supply chain program. The Moon to Mars Demonstrator Feasibility Program has already currently supported 20 feasibility grants across Australia from universities and private sector companies. Mission grants in that same program will then see some of these technologies taken into space. And finally, we're about to launch our Trailblazer mission under the Moon to Mars program, a truly inspirational project to put Australian technology near the lunar surface or on the lunar surface. And we'll be announcing more about this shortly. To capitalise on all of these opportunities, India and Australia have recently updated our MOU, and we recently signed that back again in 2021 at the beginning of this year, and pursuing the peaceful use of space. The updated MOU enables a greater degree of collaboration across government, industry and academia. Under this MOU, we will be supporting ISRO's ambitious Gaganyaan mission, and already significant conversations and planning are underway. Yes, slowed by the challenges of COVID, but nevertheless working together to support this mission that India holds so proud. Building on this, we are looking to work together on space life sciences, manufacturing, launch, and other regional opportunities. And indeed, we are continuing to work with ISRO through the international community as we are both members of the International Space Exploration Coordination Group. And as we grow our economy towards 12 billion and 30,000 jobs by 2030, we do so in the spirit of partnership and international collaboration. We can't reach the stars alone. I believe it's an old African proverb, if you want to go further, you go together. So I'm looking forward to the opportunities that our national industries will be able to collaborate on. And thank you, Michael, back to you.
Thanks very much for that, Carl. Some great sentiments there and already a great deal of activity underway. So you've both set a strong foundation for the rest of the session. With both governments doing so much together already, it's a natural next step to want to be doing more commercially. So we'll look to our representatives from industry and academia now. We'll start with an Australian startup that is developing in-space transportation capabilities for small satellites. Mr. Rajat Kulshester is an aerospace engineer and the CEO and co-founder of Space Machines Company, managing an assembly plant in Sydney and an R&D subsidiary here in Bengaluru. Rajat, it'd be great if you could talk through a little bit about your tech and services and how you can support Indian customers, key areas that you're seeking to collaborate, and for Australian startups, sort of highlighting the reasons why you decide to set up in India. Over to you.
Thanks for that, Michael. I hope everyone can hear me. Thanks for having me on this panel. It's great to be on here with companies from both Australia and India, and really talking about this really important issue and how do we work together. With our presence both in Sydney and Adelaide in Australia and Bengaluru, we're already doing a lot of collaboration across engineering and also commercial side of things and how we engage with Indian customers in a more organized and structured manner. So give you a little bit of information about the company. Space Machines Company is about 2.5 years old. We started by solving the problem that as launch is getting cheaper, rideshare models of putting satellites into orbit is emerging, which also creates the issue of how do you get customers and satellite operators the benefit of more cost-effective models, but at the same time being put into precise orbits. And so space machines, in-space mobility and logistics solutions are trying to address this. And in addition, the idea of how do you get good launch cadence and frequency to access those orbits more, in a more broader terms, and working globally for customers and operators on how we can deliver their satellites to the precise orbits they're looking to get into. So the solution on our end is an in-space mobility and logistics solution called Optimus, which is compatible with most large launchers globally. And it's modular, so it allows and supports a majority of mission profiles, whether they're low Earth constellations, MEO, GEO, or lunar, and also allowing customers with flexibility in terms of propulsion, whether that's chemical or electrical, proven technologies that we've sort of built into the architecture. And as we look at the services that globally customers are demanding, we look at pure transportation, which is, how do you get a satellite from point to point, whether that's within LEO as part of a constellation, or LEO to MEO and GEO and lunar and beyond. As a second service, how do we start to provide a hosted solution for customers, Earth observation, communication, IoT, who are requiring a hosted bus? And so how do we start to enable those customers to quickly get to space and access those orbits? In addition to the emerging servicing mission profiles, whether that's extension, repair, refueling, bring in use of spectrum, and starting to look at those type of mission profiles. And finally, I think what we're most excited about is the idea of exploration as a service. In the past, there's been science missions that have costed a lot of money and taken a long time. Our view is, how do we start to create exploration as a service that allows a more democratized access to space exploration, whether that's lunar, Mars, and others, at a cost-effective manner. And a great example that previous Indian missions have proven that you can do it in a cost-effective manner and reliably. So our view is, how do we start to extend that to a more larger customer base globally? In terms of our progress, we have our first flight planned for next year with some early customers. And we're also looking for more experimental early customers to come onto that flight and the second flight after that. But it'll be, I believe, the largest commercial satellite that Australia would have launched so far. And so we're really looking forward to that. And as Michael mentioned, from a team perspective, we've got a team based in Bangalore. And the reason why we placed it in Bangalore was, access to talent, it being the heart of India's space ecosystem, and obviously ISRO and SIL. So I think it made natural sense for us to base the team there, whilst leveraging their capability alongside Australian counterparts in Sydney and Australia. Adelaide is our headquarters, and Sydney is where we do a lot of the assembly, integration, and testing of our platform. In addition to that, we're also partnered with Deloitte Australia, and Carl mentioned that early in terms of lunar mission. We've launched an initiative called Lunar Ascent, which is a transport and communication mission to the moon in 2024. And our hope is to carry Australian nanosatellites and put them into orbit around the moon. So as far as lunar ambition, we're really looking forward to collaborating with the great work that the Indian space ecosystem's already done, and leveraging that, and whilst also providing some complementary capabilities that our company specifically can provide to some of those missions like Gaganyaan. In terms of collaboration, we're really looking forward to working with ISRO and other launch services providers in India to make our platform compatible with the launchers out there. Also looking at supply chain partnerships. Some of them we are already engaging with, but we want to do that more broadly for subsystems that we're going to end up using in our platform. And on the commercial side, how do we start to open access between the two countries for customers? And I think that's a really important area, and collaborations that are driven by that commercial centricity, I think, are sustainable and feasible in the future. So I think I'll end my sort of take on this here. Thanks for the opportunity again, Michael.
Well, thanks very much for that, Rajat. A great overview of your tech and capabilities, but also the benefits of being based in close proximity to ISRO and other space companies down in Bengaluru. And also having a subsidiary also helps get access into that ecosystem. So that's useful for other Australian firms. Now to Australia's Smartsat Cooperative Research Centre, a consortium of universities, research organisations and industry partners with the know-how and tech to service end-to-end space missions. We have Dr. Tim Parsons, who heads the Smartsat's Aurora startup cluster, which works with companies that represent every part of the space supply chain. So he'll talk about how these capabilities can support India's growing space sector. And as chair of the Space Industry Association of Australia, he can also talk about how Indian companies can engage their members to pursue prospective areas of collaboration. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes, so I'm delighted to represent the Aurora Space Cluster. We have as our mission bringing together, just as Rajat has described, lots of different companies, young space startups, together with SMEs, and help them collaborate and commercialize great cutting-edge research. In Australia, we're a relatively small country, and so we kind of value our success or rate our success based on how successful we are in exports and in collaborative work overseas. And so opportunities now at this stage of our growth in the space sector, opportunities to work with companies around the world are really important. As Michael alluded to, we've got an ambition to do nose cone to tail. We want to do missions in lunar orbit, right down to, we want space services and applications down on the ground. Australia has been a world leader in things like augmented GPS or SBAS. So we've got certain parts of Australia that have literally 2 to 3 centimeters resolution of spatial accuracy, thanks to a combination of space services and ground-based services. So we see this, that space is essentially an operating system for modern digital society. It's becoming critical infrastructure. And so space startups, of course, is one of the ways that we see you can run lots of experiments efficiently to create new jobs, harness leapfrog R&D, and turn it into commercial products. One of the other things we're learning with our roughly 60 companies is that deep tech entrepreneurship, deep tech startup entrepreneurship, such as we've just heard about with Rajat and Space Machines Corporation, is not easy. It requires partners. It requires more time and capital to get to a product that is actually ready for an end customer. And so that's where the opportunity to work with Indian companies on Indian and Australian space missions, to work on payloads, to work on avionics systems, to work on data interchange, both things that are upstream up in space and also applications down on the Earth, is very exciting. Downstream companies, I'll give you a few thumbnail sketches. So for example, one of the downstream companies I can talk about in our network is Lux Aerobotics. That's a company using space imaging equipment, but actually putting it on balloons so that it has a super high resolution imagery for crops, for insurance assessment after disaster recovery, for managing water. We have companies like Alula that are commercializing Australia's Digital Earth Australia Open Data Cube. So that's very much about trying to make space imagery and space data more accessible through an API. We have companies upstream like High Earth Orbit Robotics, who are taking photographs of spacecraft from other spacecraft to do space situational awareness, as well as lower the cost of commissioning new vehicles. We have companies like AI Craft, who hopefully you'll hear from in one of our other sessions, using artificial intelligence on board spacecraft so that some of that processing of imagery and space data happens at the edge in the spacecraft. And of course, Space Machines Company, very exciting, taking payloads to high Earth orbit, to cislunar, and hopefully beyond. And we're very, very excited about the heritage that that company has with a team already here in India. So Smartsat CRC has this goal to unlock the power of Australia's research. We have very, very advanced systems design, precision engineering, and scientific research capability. And we need to get it out of the lab and get it into companies and into products and up and out into space. How cool would it be to do that together with the Indian space ecosystem? So, Michael, that's all from me, but thank you so much for having us today.
Thanks very much for that, Tim. Some really exciting areas we can certainly look to pursue. And the Australian government is looking to provide support where we can to bring industries together on both sides. So we'll keep the conversation going there. Now we'll move to one of Australia's leading incubators in space at the University of South Australia's Innovation and Collaboration Centre. Ms. Jasmine Vredenberg is the director of the ICC and actually developed its flagship startup initiative, Venture Catalyst Space Program. It'd be great to hear a bit more about the tangible support that Venture Catalyst Space Program actually provides as far as funding, mentorship and connectivity with industry, as well as any success stories from the first few iterations and when the next round is open. So I'll hand over to Jasmine, who I think has a presentation.
Thanks, Michael. I'll just share my screen so you can see what I'm going to talk about. Okay. So thanks so much for having me here today. It's great. I'm really pleased to talk about what we've been doing here through our space program. So just before I start about that, a little bit about our centre. We were established in 2015 as a strategic partnership between the South Australian Government and the University of South Australia. And our mission was really to support the next generation of high growth and scalable startups through our incubator program and our connection with research. So we're quite unique in the ecosystem. In 2018, we established our Venture Catalyst Space Program, and that was really designed as a one-of-a-kind incubator combined with an accelerator program, specifically for space companies. And since then, we've supported 19 companies. So far, 6 of those have come from overseas, and including 3 of those have come from India. So a little bit about the structure of our program. We have an accelerator component that runs for 6 months, and that provides structured business support workshops that are tailored really for founders to understand how they can establish and really accelerate their business. We have mentoring sessions that are one-to-one as well, and they are there to help the founders implement the guidance that's provided through the workshops. We have a $10,000 stipend that's provided in terms of funding, and that's really, you're able to spend that on anything you like to help your business set up. And then wrapped around that is an incubator services that's, similar to what other university incubator services provides, where we provide access to office space, access to our research, access to student placements, access to our prototyping labs, and access to our people as well. We also have a pool of industry space experts, and that's really critical for the founders who are in our program. That's that real connection piece. So if they're looking to establish new customers or work out how to establish themselves in the industry, that's what this pool of experts is all about. And then finally, part of our program is part of our community. So we build up activities and really helping founders build resilience and also networking opportunities and to make them feel part of a cohort. So just quickly, that's the acceleration support services, workshops, mentoring and funding, delivered over 6 months, and then we have our incubation support services delivered over the 12 months. So we've got, sorry, I've got the wrong slide thing up. Oops. I'll just go into some of the companies we've supported. So Astroport Space Technologies is one of our companies that's come in globally. They're based in San Antonio, Texas. They're looking at using moon regolith to build structures on the moon's surface so that they can launch into Mars. Basically started the program in 2021 in March. Since then, they've established a partnership with one of our local universities, University of Adelaide, through their Andy Thomas Space Resource Centre. So that's been a great achievement for them. They've connected with some mining companies in Australia, so they're looking at technologies around how they can actually use different types of materials, and they've opened an office in Australia as well. One of the companies we've supported in our second program was Astrogate Labs, Indian-based startup, and they're doing optical ground flight new optical ground terminals with higher bandwidth and cloud network operations. So they're creating faster and cheaper communications. They've established some really good connections with the universities in Australia as well, and actually signed an agreement with one of those universities to try and build their ground station. Another of our current cohort is Tagantra. You may have heard from them. They've recently raised some funding in June this year. They've hired lots of new staff, so we've been helping them in terms of scaling up their operations, helping them with their HR, helping them with getting a launch vehicle next year as well. So they're doing amazing things too. And one of our local companies, Spacelifts, this is Gula, she's looking at solar cells that can be used for future space missions. They're low cost, clean, flexible, and the intent is to put them onto spacesuits so they can take power with them. So part of what we do with the program is actually helping people establish connections with the network and the community, but we also help with the visa. So if there is a new visa coming out on the 28th of September, the entrepreneur stream, so it allows startups, early stage entrepreneurs to live and develop their concepts in South Australia. As a service provider, the ICC is able to support applications and for that visa. So it's a really good opportunity for anyone looking to come over to Australia and work on their startup. This visa actually leads to permanent residency. And just finally, this is how to apply. We have just opened up our applications. They're running until the 28th of November for our 4th program. So we're looking to take up to 10 companies in our next cohort. And thanks, Michael. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Jasmine. So some great initiatives there and support that we can provide Indian startups as well. There's already been some success, and we actually have one of the startups that was incubated earlier this year, 114 AI, Miss Verinder Kapoor. So Verinder, it'd be great if you could talk a little bit about your startup, why you decided to participate in that Venture Catalyst program, what support you received and whether it helped you integrate into the Australian space ecosystem, and where you're looking to collaborate with Australia further. Over to you, Verinder.
Thank you so much, Michael, for this opportunity, and thank you so much for all of the wonderful panelists and their comments earlier today. So just to give a quick overview of 114 AI, we are a data fusion company, and we found our home in space domain awareness. If you are aware of the space domain awareness data fusion challenges, it's one of those very interesting areas of cooperation in space where multi-country cooperation is really critical. So, it's a really great place for us to be having this conversation. There is data coming from sensors that are scattered across the world. India has its own sensors. Australia has a very, very large and a dominating ecosystem in this space. The other large players are US and France. So it is necessarily one of those spaces that requires international cooperation, but there is where the challenge lies, is that every country, every ecosystem supports a different kind of data, bringing that together in real time and fusing it so that analysis, AI, algorithms can be built on top of it really is the challenge. So we're working along with both with the US, with the UK, but also in very large way with Australia to kind of bring those solutions together and help them create that information architecture, which will allow space domain awareness solutions to become mainstream for space traffic management, to become to conform to that international world order, and so that all countries can really operate that. We started our engagement in the space with the United States Air Force, and we continue to grow. So for us, Australia and the UK became the really natural partners, and that's one of the reasons we applied to the Venture Catalyst program. Jasmine and the team have been really fantastic in facilitating not just our entry into the ecosystem, but also in creating relationships, helping us crisp up our value proposition, all of those fantastic support tools. For example, one of their partners at the program is a consulting company called LeapSheet. And I cannot stress how fantastic they've been and how much they have helped us really, create the material, for an early stage startup, creating the material, being able to get your messaging out there has really been fantastic. So it's not just the program itself, but it's also their choice of partners that makes it a really unique value proposition. Likewise, one of the areas of cooperation and collaboration we're now entering into is to start to participate in the Pacific Cell for the Sprint Advanced Concept Training, which is a multi-country commercial space domain awareness exercise that happens 3 times a year. So there again, we're looking to increase our participation with the Australian space ecosystem, integrate our tools and our products into their supply chain, and make this sort of multi-country cooperation really a possibility. The program has been fantastic at a couple of things. One, as I mentioned, was the support on getting your startup ready for that communication. The second is, once that communication starts, is being able to provide the right industry connections, both with the commercial industry as well as with the Australian military and the space ecosystem. For another example is that, for example, we've had a long-standing partnership with Microsoft. We're now starting to partner with their Australia team to support these exercises from the Australian Space Agency and the military side. The Australian space ecosystem is a really, really interesting space to become to enter and think about globalizing your space startup. It's a much more inclusive ecosystem. There's a lot lower barriers to entry. And they are actively seeking international cooperation, especially from India. It becomes a great launchpad because Australia has those relationships with the other more challenging global ecosystems that you want to eventually participate in, and it creates that really great conduit to getting into that ecosystem. It also becomes a great de-risking strategy. You understand if your tools and services have a place in this industry, and there are some fantastic programs that I think exist, especially from my understanding in South Australia, that are really designed for entrepreneurs to create that global launchpad. For example, as Jasmine just talked about, the Global Talent Visa and the other visa programs really give you an opportunity to take your company global. Another great program that I would encourage Indian startups or Indian companies to really look into is their landing pad program, where they provide and facilitate not just mentoring and support services and ways into the ecosystem, but also financial incentives for companies to start at the subsidiaries or joint ventures, or however you would like to kind of start to participate in that ecosystem. The business development resources that are provided by the Department of Trade and the DTI are also really unique and worth looking at, where they provide you expert introductions. They provide you with access and travel grants to go to a lot of these international conventions. They're really doing a lot to support the Australian, especially in South Australia, the South Australian startup ecosystem. And for Indian companies looking to expand globally, this becomes a really great conduit to setting up a subsidiary, participating in these programs, and really being able to take advantage of the very unique position that the Australian space industry sets us up for. We are very, very committed as a company to our future collaboration with Australia, and we've had a very eye-opening experience through the Venture Catalyst program. We intend to incorporate a subsidiary, for example, in South Australia in 2022, and frankly, I cannot recommend it enough. For Indian companies looking to start exploring their global potential, especially in the space sector, I would really suggest that applying to the Venture Catalyst program really gives you the exposure and the momentum you need to plan on how and when you want to launch your global expansion plans. It is a really unique ecosystem with a very, very compelling value proposition, both for entering the Australian market, as well as I mentioned, and I can't stress on this enough, getting into that ecosystem and using that as a launching pad for global expansion. So thank you so much, Michael, for this opportunity. Thank you, Jasmine, for all the great work that you're doing, and for holding our hands as we've gone through the Venture Catalyst program. I especially mentioned here that, as we were dealing in India with the really, really bad second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, Jasmine and the team have been extremely accommodating. So there's a huge amount of flexibility, understanding, and compassion that's built into this program as well. So for all Indian startup founders, when you're looking to launch a company globally, please explore this opportunity. I can't recommend it enough. Thank you so much.
Verinda, thank you so much for those insights. It really highlights how incubation programs can really be one of the fastest ways to integrate into the Australian market. And you've also mentioned how it's a good test bed and safety net for your products and services to build your confidence before you consider other markets that might have further risk as well. So great to hear for you. Thanks so much for sharing those insights. And I'm sure those listening on the line are very keen to apply. So we'll now speak with another Indian startup, Skyroot Aerospace, represented by CEO Mr. Pawan Chandana, to basically talk about what his company doing, and essentially the tech, the services, the international partnerships that you're exploring, and the core areas that we might be able to collaborate. You're also the founding member of the Space Federation of India, so it'd be helpful to understand how your members might want to engage Australian firms, as well as our Space Industry Association that Tim spoke about earlier. Over to you.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me, Michael. Excited to be here. Just to give an introduction, Skyroot is a space launch company building one of the world's most cost-effective space launch vehicles. To start with, we're addressing the launch requirements of the small satellite market with a Vikram series of launch vehicles and planning an orbital launch next year. And it's an exciting time. The world space sector is looking towards both India and Australia, as India opens up the space sector to private players, and Australia forming a space agency recently, investing a lot in infrastructure, including building spaceports, and also having very ambitious plans for the next decade. Also good to see very proactive team at the Australian consulate and Australian space industry officials, and also very heartening to see few Indian startups already having part of their operations there. So we at Skyroot are looking forward to explore Australia for launching our vehicles and also for launching satellites for Australian satellite companies. Also to your question on SpaceFed, I am one of the founding members of SpaceFed, which is also called Space Federation of India, and we also have Awais here on the panel as well, who is part of the SpaceFed leadership. So just to introduce, SpaceFed is an industry association only for space startups. It is built by startups for startups to have a common voice to advance policy, government affairs, networking, promotion, and collaboration. So we have a platform with like 20 to 30 space startups and growing. It is good to see many of our members interested in exploring Australia to set up operations, subsidiaries, and also joint ventures. We have a session also tomorrow in partnership with the Australian Consulate to explore methods of setting up operations in Australia. It is good to see a lot of interest, and we should do more events which can increase engagement of Indian startups with Australian space ecosystem, and also like partnership with the Australian Space Agency and Space Association as well in the future. So thanks a lot, Michael, for this opportunity, and over to you. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that, Pawan. And it's great that you're keen to do more events and sessions together. I think by sharing this, we get a better understanding of both ecosystems, access points, and how we can do more together. So we'll certainly be in touch to facilitate those connections. So now to another Indian startup. So we've got Pixel, which develops hyperspectral satellites capable of capturing very detailed imagery. And the company will soon be launching India's first commercial satellite. So we've got the CEO and founder, Mr. Awais Ahmed, who will talk a bit about Pixel's tech, how Pixel has had to pivot during COVID, and to outline key areas that they're seeking collaboration with Australia. So over to you, Awais.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Before we start, just to give an overview of Pixel, we started in early 2019, so it's been about 2.5 years since we have been in operation. And when we started out, we started with wanting to make use of space data down here on Earth for making life on Earth better. And we wanted to solve a whole bunch of issues such as identifying pest infestations and crop diseases before they became a menace to the crops, identifying emissions that are occurring around the globe that are adding to global warming and climate change, or looking at the impact that human life is having on forests and other environment-related use cases. But that's when we realized one thing is that existing satellite data has helped us make good maps. It makes Google Earth look better. But when we're trying to look at things in a lot more detail, such as identifying these pest infestations or looking at these emissions, we can't quantify it or even see it with the satellites that are up there today. Existing satellite constellations are blind to a lot of global pressing issues, and there was a need of a better class of satellites that could go up and do that. And that's where Pixel came in. We decided that we would build and deploy our own constellation of what we call hyperspectral satellites that provides 50 times more information than any constellation that's up there today. What we are planning to do would be the world's first hyperspectral constellation in the world, providing daily coverage globally. So no matter where we want to see how things are changing, we'll be able to do that in a 24-hour notice. And not only that, it's not enough for us to take photographs of the Earth and beam those photographs down. It needs to be as easy as clicking on a browser for people to extract insights out of this. It's not enough for the data to come down. organizations and people should be able to take that data and convert that into something that's actionable. They need to know where a pest infestation is or what that pest infestation is for them to be able to use a particular pesticide or fertilizer to make that better. People need to know where the emissions are coming from so that those can be quantified and stopped in the years to come. So we're building a platform as well that provides all the tools and the infrastructure necessary for organizations to analyze this data. So that's about us. We are a space data company operating at the intersection of hardware, which is the satellites, and software, which is the data platform that we're building. We planned to launch our satellite earlier this year, but there have been a whole bunch of delays due to COVID. We could not test our satellite for a whole bunch of months. And one of the interesting things that we did then is we realized that we can't depend on a supply chain of one particular country for us to be able to manufacture these satellites in case something like this happens. So we put backup supply chains in place from multiple countries, working with vendors in Europe, working with vendors in South Africa, working with vendors in India as well. Going ahead, we plan to do that globally as well. Just last week, we had a chat with the Space Machines company here to see if we could use their facilities to launch our satellites to the exact orbits. So there's a whole bunch of collaboration that will be there. Space, as its whole nature, is global in nature. Once we put our satellites up there, they're not restricted to a particular nation's boundaries. They're capturing the entire Earth, and so it becomes a responsibility and a mandate to make sure that the data that's coming down is also used globally. Just in the last couple of months, we have signed on board a large agricultural analytics company based out of Australia for providing our hyperspectral data to make sure that agriculture becomes more efficient nationwide. We've also signed on with the mining company to help make sure that the sustainable practices that they're doing in terms of tailing ponds and biodiversity damage that's occurring is curtailed. And this is just the start. There's a whole lot of applications that are in Australia as well as globally that we would love to partner with downstream partners as well as folks that build components for satellites that we can use as we try and expand our supply chain globally as well. So again, thanks for having me here. The times are right now for us to be able to collaborate. Both the countries, I think, are starting to grow in the world ecosystem of space technology, and it'll be exciting to see how these collaborations will happen. Thanks again for having me, Michael, and all the best to everyone.
Thank you for that, Awais. Very to the point, and it's clear that there's already so many areas that we can do more together, and also to support your own ambitions to go global as well. So thank you to all our speakers for those initial remarks. We now have about 15 minutes to have a bit more of a panel discussion with some of the questions that we've received from our audience members. We have grouped them together because there were well over 40, so we'll do our best to get through as many as possible. Now, there were a lot of questions coming in on Australia's launch capabilities and services. So I actually thought I'd offer this to one of our audience members who actually does a lot in this space before we hear from the Space Agency. So I've got Mr. Peter Williams, the General Manager for Sales at Southern Launch, who can outline some of the support that we can offer international rocket manufacturers and their payload customers. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Michael, and congratulations to you and the team for organising a really informative session. Look, as a salesperson, it's a joy for me to interface with people all around the world, and I remember fondly catching up with representatives from Skyroot and also Agnicol at the Washington IAC in 2019, and it's been great to see those businesses develop, and we've continued to touch base, and hopefully one day we'll perhaps see one of those rockets launching from Australia. The Australian Space Agency has issued 2 launch facility licenses for launch capabilities to space in Australia. Both of these are held now by Southern Launch. Our first one earlier in the year was with our Kaniba test range, which is a overland suborbital test range with about 145 kilometres of downrange. And the other is our Whalers Way orbital launch facility, which is the coastline that's behind me in my background for sun-synchronous and polar orbits. We are also the first company in Australia to be granted a launch permit for a launch from our launch facility at Whalers Way, and we expect to see that fulfilled in the near future. Why Australia? Well, we have a very stable political and economic environment. We've got favourable climate. Our launch facilities don't get snowed in 2 or 3 months a year. We've got a supportive industrial base, and as Carl has so clearly outlined, the regulatory environment is there to support and grow the business. There are other sites in Australia that are also working towards launch capability. I'm not authorised to speak on their behalf, but Carl's already mentioned Equatorial Launch Australia in the Northern Territory, who will be supporting a NASA suborbital mission. And also the Queensland Government is looking at sites for Eastern Australian seaboard. A site near Bowen called Abbott Point potentially will be developed by Gilmore Space Technologies. And there's also Space Centre Australia near Weipa in the very far north of Queensland. So plenty of opportunities to satisfy the different orbital requirements, and Southern Launch with a strong engineering background can support not only the launching, but also design, the flight safety analysis. We have our own in-house software to do that, and we can help with insurance and other aspects of the regulatory environment. So I'll leave it there, but there's plenty to look forward to with the launching activities in Australia.
Thanks very much for that, Peter. And I might just turn to Carl to see if there was anything else to say about the regulations for launching in Australia. It's obviously a new process that, like India, opening it up to the private sector. So it'd be good to just better understand that process for our Indian colleagues.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Peter. As a matter of fact, I don't think I can add much more to what Peter's actually stated there. You know, the commercial opportunities, as he suggested, are exactly what we're trying to promote and what we're trying to support through the regulations and the activities there. The regulations were updated recently, soon after the Australian Space Agency was itself started, and so that takes into account some of the needs and some of the expectations of, say, for example, you know, horizontal launch and some of those other, you know, high-powered rockets and longer distances, and higher orbits, etc. And so I think in those sorts of instances where we are working through the regulatory process and we're looking at getting the feedback from companies such as Southern Launch and from others who are seeking to a launch in Australia as well too. And so we're building that capability, and we're building that experience base with the growing industry itself. And so looking to collaborate as closely as possible. Obviously, you know, the launch sector is going to be changing and shifting over time with commercial activities. And so again, working with people who are in this sector, I think it would be good to essentially start to get an understanding of what their needs and requirements will be. But just to cover off, you know, again, we are looking at you know, this entrepreneurialism through safety, and that's the primary reason for essentially looking at how we review our regulations as they are today, and then looking to see how the ecosystem develops in the future, and trying to essentially look at how the regulations may be able to support that into the future. But I might just stop it there. I think Peter's summary was really good.
Thanks very much for that, Carl, and also to Peter. It's really helpful for Indian colleagues to understand that there is a process in place and that they are able to look at options in Australia. I've got one that I think might be best for Tim Parsons, building on some of the experience of your members. So essentially, India prides itself as being one of the cheapest and most efficient places on Earth to manufacture and launch satellites. Wouldn't Indian firms be better off continuing to do this from India, given the comparatively higher cost in Australia? What are the efficiency savings or benefits that Australia or Australian firms offer India in this space? So we'll start with Tim, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, I think Australia offers some very advanced systems design, precision engineering capabilities, talent. You know, we were the last kind of Western economy to really dive in to have a space program. So in a funny way, we benefit from last mover advantage. We have a lot of where India, I think, has these competitive advantages in costs and efficiencies. We also have a lot of knowledge around advanced processes, components, capabilities. And of course, Australian organizations are welcomed all around the world in lots of other places through our very intersectional society and very internationally aware society. So I think we also have extremely sophisticated ground station facilities. Almost every major space agency has a facility in Australia so that they can manage missions around the clock. Our resources sector has developed extreme knowledge in autonomous robotics. We have robots under the water, under the ground, and they're looking to send them up into space. And you know, when NASA went looking for a place where you could find the most advanced autonomous robotics for Artemis, they came to Western Australia. We have some of the most advanced optical technologies. We pioneered the use of lasers and optical fibers for internet transmission. We have very advanced quantum, artificial intelligence, and data fusion. Australia's Digital Earth Australia and its open data cube are held up around the world as, you know, we tend to get pushed to the front of the class as an example of how you can fuse different satellites' data sets and calibrate and validate those data sets so they can be compared accurately. And of course, we really pride ourselves also in systems engineering. So being able to create and manage, design very complex systems. So I think there's a lot of complementary skills and talent and in Australia, and we're ambitious to start to see that those capabilities are used in space. They're used to create systems. And I think Australian and Indian organizations can actually work together to create next generation, you know, highly efficient, lower cost, but also high performing systems, expand our horizons beyond the Earth. And yeah, as I said before, how cool would it be for us to fly an Australian-Indian space mission together, leveraging all those capabilities and strengths?
Thanks very much for that, Tim. Very helpful. We've got one for ISRO. So just regarding the FDI norms. So we understand at the moment the current provision is for 49% foreign investment. Are you expecting only a marginal increase to that figure, or could it go as high as 100%? And when can we expect a decision from government? We'd welcome any clarity on that.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. As I already mentioned, ISRO Department of Space is in the process of bringing industry-friendly policies, and revising the existing FDI policy is also progressing well. And definitely the figures will improve, and we'll be soon putting this policy, this draft policy, for public consultation. We have already put, we are working on 10 policies, sector-specific space policies. Already 6 are there in the public domain for getting the opinion from the public. And soon FDA policy will also be there, and it will be more, I would say it will be more friendly for foreign companies to invest in almost all areas of space.
Excellent. That's very reassuring to hear, especially as more Australian companies are looking to India as well for collaboration. Now, we've already heard a little bit about visas, but there are a couple more. So I might turn to our High Commissioner. When can Indian companies and startups expect to be able to travel to Australia to pursue many of the collaboration opportunities outlined here today?
Michael, as Jasmine has said, there are opportunities to come through our borders, and the happy news in Australia, of course, is that we now have more than 70% with the first vaccination and over 50% with the second vaccination. So it's only going to head in the right direction. But the Australian government does have a process for non-citizens in critical sectors or with critical skills to apply for travel exemptions. And these include, as you've heard, those delivering services in sectors critical to Australia's economic recovery, or areas where entry would otherwise be in Australia's national interest, supported by federal or state authorities. And as Jasmine was saying, the South Australian government is supporting people to come into that program. As we've discussed today, this covers many segments of the space sector, from critical infrastructure, telecommunications, engineering, large-scale manufacturing and emerging technology, and full details are available on the exemption process on our Australian Home Affairs Department's website. In the meantime, we encourage you to continue to engage virtually like we are today. And if you need assistance in making the connection, please reach out to our diplomatic network across India. That's what we're here for. and the Australian Space Agency.
Thanks for that, High Commissioner. And we can also share the website for the participants in this session after. Now, we might turn to the industry speakers that we've all had, so both India and Australia. Just in a minute or so, if you can just talk about briefly what you think might improve commercial collaboration. What is the one thing, either an action by government or something that could be industry-led, that you think could accelerate how we can work together commercially? So I might start with our Indian colleagues. So perhaps Pawan. Still on the line, Pawan? All right, I might turn to Awais.
Hey, Michael, thanks for that question. So I think the government obviously has to support this sector where in the initial stages, I think there's a few ways in which it can take off even more quickly than it is. Firstly, availability of grant funding, so that initial valley of death where people are trying to do something and need to get to a point where they're building a proof of concept before they can do it commercially. I think availability of enough research and grant funding for those opportunities from either country would be good, either in partnership with research organizations or universities as well. And secondly, being a buyer for the solutions that the startups are coming with. With space startups, it usually takes some time before they hit commercial traction and they're able to sustain. So having state governments, national governments, different departments, being a buyer and a customer for these services would actually be good. But apart from that, making sure that the policy is really as straightforward as possible and as simple as possible, so that people have an idea of how to go about it and how long it will take for that process. If a certain regulatory process is going to take 6 months or 4 months, so that it can be planned beforehand as people try and go do things. So I think these would be the three things: availability of early grant funding to make sure that the stage at which most startups die is taken care of. The government being a customer so that companies can reach a point where they can start selling commercially, and finally, as straightforward and clean a policy as possible so that there's no confusions there.
Thanks for that, Awais. Verinda, did you have any views?
Thanks, Michael. I think my views would be very similar to what other panelists have spoken about right now. The thing with space is that there's two important things to recognize. The first is that space is necessarily a deep technology ecosystem, which means that there is much higher investment required in developing space-based capabilities. If governments were to come in on both sides and provide access to capital in the form of grant funding, that really enables and bolsters the ability of young startups to compete in this space. And that's where most of the innovation is really occurring. So the first part is if the two governments could come together and create some sort of grant funding scheme to help de-risk the early science risk of these technologies. And then engineering risk is where, venture capital, et cetera, starts to come in. The second is that while we're talking a lot about commercial space, a lot of the eventual, the buyer is eventually mostly government. Whether in the form of, a final enabler to your or a final buyer of the product, or whether in the form of selling to the government directly. Making it easier for the Indian startup ecosystem to sell to Australia, and likewise for the Australian startup ecosystem to be able to sell to the Indian government. Creating cooperation mechanics, rules, and policy around that, I think would really enable the ecosystem. And the last one is, in this age of COVID, where travel is sort of off the cards, there needs to be better forms for engagement of companies. And that, I think, would really be a turning point in this cooperation.
Thanks, Verinda. I might turn to the Australian colleagues. So Jasmine, any views?
Yeah, I guess building on what everyone else said, why not develop a joint incubator space program between the two countries? Because I guess what I find is that not only do the startup companies end up learning about each other's market opportunities in each other's countries and making those critical connections, they often learn a lot from each other going through the program. So and they might start working together as well. So sharing a program and we can do that online would be a fantastic way, I think, of commercial collaboration in the early stages.
Thanks for that, Jasmine. Raja?
Hey, Michael. Look, I think I'm going to reflect on a lot of what the other panelists have talked about, but I think in addition, when we look to, we've got a great framework in the MOU that's been signed between India and Australia. I think, how do we start to align some of the already existing funding mechanisms available for Australian companies and our Indian counterparts around a mission? And Tim mentioned to this, like there is opportunities in space around specific areas, exploration, lunar. And so I think having a very practical, commercially driven program that allows companies from both countries to actually act in a way of being commercial contributors to that project. So I think it's sort of on the same lines as what the other panelists have talked about. And I think the second part of this, as we engage with the Indian ecosystem on the supply chain side of things, is to actually have a capability map. I think it's very hard at the moment for us to know, what are all the capabilities that Australian type space companies have and our counterparts in India. And I think, to access some of that talent and cost efficiencies and systems engineering skills on either side, you need to know what exists. And so I think from my perspective, those are the two key areas that I think would really help right now.
Great. Look, thanks very much for that. Everyone sort of mentioned needing to build on the MOU and to support collaboration. I might turn to Carl for just some final views on what we've already heard. If there's scope to perhaps develop a consortium of industry from both countries. We heard from Tim talking about, having a joint project that both countries could work on. And obviously all of our speakers have mentioned the need to support the startups through funding and the like. Is this something that we could build on with the MOU?
Absolutely. I think that there is a lot of scope there for us to explore what potential capabilities there are, what specific needs there are. We have identified a number of areas in the MOU that are elements of focus, and that industry engagement is one of those as well too. I think just addressing some of the earlier comments as well too, again, understanding all of the elements there around, the valley of death that was spoken about a little bit earlier for startups, particularly space startups and the emerging sector itself. I think that in terms of the visibility of government into space, certainly, as we've seen in the Australian context, the visibility of space and the importance of space has begun to really resonate right across the government, and I assume as well too on the India side. So there's a number of programs that we have started in the agency that are focusing on how we can address some of those elements, and grant funding as Verinda mentioned, is absolutely critical. It's needed, and from startup speak as well too. It's non-dilutive funding, which is really quite important, particularly in the early stages there. We also heard recently through a House of Representatives review that more than grant funding programs are required in terms of, say, government as customer, etc. And so the agency is turning its mind to what potential opportunities may exist in the future. In terms of research funding, I note as well too that the Australian Industry Science Research Fund has essentially started entertaining space as some of the key elements there. So that's an existing mechanism already open for Australian and Indian companies to apply to for space research. So I'd encourage those sorts of opportunities to continue to be built on. And of course, both governments, as I mentioned, are exploring new ways to focus our activities across missions and capabilities. The Gaganyaan support was a fantastic opportunity that India is pursuing and requested and asked for Australian participation and support. Of course, that's just the first potential element that we can get involved in, and then of course there's more and more potential missions and projects that we could pursue. And I think there was also one of the and referring to some of the other elements, or one of the questions that came up in the chat window as well, in terms of potential defence and defence commercialisation and industry engagement there. Again, while the agency here, the Australian Space Agency, has the civil space remit, I think given the recent conversations and the recent announcements from our governments around, say, Quad focus, etc., I think you'll start to see some opportunities opening up there as well too, around those particular elements, and defence industry collaboration, of course, dual-use technologies, and the commercial industry will eventually, understandably, look towards that as a potential source of opportunity.
Thanks very much for that, Carl. It's really helpful. Look, we unfortunately have run out of time. I know we've got some other questions to get to, but we'll try to get to them after this session. And look, this really is just the start of the conversation. It's clear there is appetite on both sides, with government, with industry, with academics as well, to be doing so much more together. So I just would like to thank our panelists who have so generously given their time to help our colleagues across both ecosystems to understand how we can do more together, as well as the evolving regulatory framework in each country and how this opens up opportunities for collaboration. Really, the sky is the limit for what we can do together. And we, the Australian government, look forward to further facilitating engagement like this in upcoming conferences as well. The High Commissioner mentioned the Sydney Dialogue and the Bengaluru Tech Summit are good opportunities where we can talk beyond bilateral engagement to working with Quad countries. We know that the International Astronautical Congress is on next month as well, another opportunity to take these conversations further. So please get in touch with us if you'd like any further information. We'll take a lot of what we've heard today and think about next steps to provide support. And look, until we can meet again, please stay safe and well. And we look forward to taking Australia-India space collaboration to new heights. So thank you very much, everyone, and all the very best.